how do you like to improve the development speed of your SAP CPI system? And I guess I was reusing too many slides, but I guess that's the only thing I've changed. The one I copied was from August, but we have made quite a number of changes since then. So let's just get started. My name is Damien Gravis. I've been working with SAP integration for 15 years, starting with XI 3.0. And on one of my first assignments, I got certified or was in this certification program. And during this time, I was tasked with, please create this kind of documentation for the scenarios we had. And it was really a lot of copy paste. And from that on, I really got tired of it, and I was trying to look into the TP-set file to see if, at that point in time, there was no API. So I was just trying to see if I can get something from these TP-set files, but I was not able to create something really useful from it, because the data was scrambled in some strange way I could not figure out. I'm an SAP mentor, and I guess I've been that for like 10 years. And then I'm a father, and I guess that takes quite a lot of time from me. So some of you may have seen what we have been doing with the Figaf tool earlier, but we are continually adding new functionalities and capabilities. So if you saw what we were able to do, I guess half a year ago, we have added quite a number of important features that will likely enable you to do CPI a little better, or a lot better. And we still have some way to go before we get the perfect. Probably we'll never get that. But that's, yeah, probably what it's about. So why do you need to develop faster? If you just take a look at the backlog you have of interfaces, project scenarios or anything like that, you'll probably see why. There is just so many scenarios that you need to develop and figure out how you can do that. And when originally I was looking at this CPI and looked at some of the pre-delivered content, it looked like, yeah, you're probably going to be doing less integration with what they have been doing. With SAP, what SAP had been doing, but now I'm not so sure. It seems like you would obviously get some success factors or scenarios easier, or some of the pre-built thing would definitely help you, but you still have to create quite a number of integration objects. And yeah, you'd probably spend... A lot of people I've talked with do not have these 2 extra hours to just figure out what to do with their scenario. So and save more time. And I think that is just because there's too many things going on. Anyone else able to hear me?
Yes, Daniel,
good.
We are able to.
Okay, good. Sorry, you should not be able to mute. Okay. Okay. Good. Do not allow some. Like that. Okay. Yes. So I'm just following the chat. Yes, so you have probably created a delivery process, and in the time I've been working with SAP, yeah, there has been different scenarios. I think when we started with this project in 2004 or whatever it was, the focus was on, yeah, create some kind of a document, put it into Solution Manager, and that way people knew it had been created and everything was good, and well, in reality, no one really know if that document would easy, so, or would actually exist and be created. And obviously in a PI world there was all these different objects that related to the same thing. In a CPI world, you just have one integration object that you can move around and deal with. I think the thing with this delivery process, and the reason why I've always been so frustrated about it, is it really does not capture the essence of what was changed. Because the time we did this copy paste, we just put it in and no one knows actually updated or not, if it worked. I've been trying to create different documentation in the process, but the amount of work you needed to put in it versus the automation wasn't really there. So that is the big challenge of it, and you cannot really count on these documents to be updated, because you'll get some contractor in, or you will just make a small change because the business wanted, you need to deliver it, and you want to go home on time, and just let's fix it and not worry about the other thing. And then you end up with documentation that's not updated. And good. So normally you'd have a development process. I don't know if it will look like this. You probably have a lot better graphic layout of your development model, but in general, no matter how you're doing development, it will always contain these kind of steps. So you'd have specification, you would have development, you would have some change management, some transport, and obviously at the end you would end up with doing support of this thing. And this is what we as developers need to work on when dealing with any project. What's really the important part of this? And with the Figaf tool, we're able to support most of these areas, except the specification, which is probably more a paper-driven approach to figure out what is actually supposed to happen. So yeah, in the specification, we need to understand what is developed. Are there any accelerators we can use, pre-delivered content, any products that actually support this, or any content we can reuse. I think one of the things that Figaf tool can enable is it can enable better searching for content. The Figaf tool is the one I would share to you today about what it can do to make the governance process better, how you can deliver CPI content a lot better. So yeah, so some of the things that it does improve the delivery process, and I think we'll go into some of these more details about how it actually does it. But the idea is that it's able to deliver modifications to interfaces faster because it's automated. We also have testing part, so that improves the quality of it. And we have the ability to actually do audit log of changes. We also ensure this high quality of governance that is expected in 2020, that we are not able to just deliver, just say we have written something, but it's really supported. And I think when a lot of times when I've done CPI development, I needed to have a developer access to it to be able to deploy things, and I'm not really fond of that. Let's see. And then we automate the regression testing. I think that is also one of the key topics, because when you're doing CPI development, it becomes quite messy pretty quickly. And that means that once the next developer needs to take over this project, it becomes really difficult for her to understand what was going on. How do I actually run this interface? What kind of data is going around in it? And that is why you need to have this automated regression testing as a part of it. So I got two questions for you. Which demo would you like to see? I can do the one where I try to just go from scratch. I will show you how to install the system, getting started, up and running, then type in 1 in the chat and I'll give and the other approach is if I will just start with our configured system and I'll show you what the tool can do. And the benefit of that one is that you'll actually see what all the areas that the tool can help with. The first one will show you how easy it is to get started, and obviously it's a little more challenging. So which one do you want to see? Number 1, then type 1 into the chat, or number 2, then type number 2 into the chat. Okay. Okay, it seems like it is number 2 that wins, so that's good. We will take it from there. So we start out with testing, and I think that the testing is important because, as I said, this would allow multiple developers to actually support one interface. And in our normal world, it is, what happens? You have a contractor in, or something like that, they will move on, and you will be able to actually support it better. So the way we're doing testing in CPI world and is a little different than what we're doing in CPI or in PI world. The idea is that we'll switch the iFlow into trace mode. You can send a number of messages into it. Once you have processed these messages, we can download these messages and we can actually start using those as test cases. So let me just see, and we got a few different options here that we can use the current iFlow if it is SOAP HTTP process direct. If it is something, a new iFlow that we do not have as supported, we can actually create a new iFlow with HTTP adapter. So we'll just make a copy of it, and then we can actually trigger it on demand with the specific content we want. And for some scenario, for instance, if you're doing SuccessFactors integration, the amount of time you can hire the same employee and use that as a good regression testing is pretty limited. Second time you run it, you will get into trouble. And what we have done is we have enabled mocking with the Figaf tool, so you can actually use the Figaf tool as a mocking server. That instead of sending the request to SuccessFactors, we'll just send it to the Figaf tool. You'll get the response back, and the benefit here is that you would actually be able to test all your Groovy script and processing that they work. You would obviously not test the adapter and the end-to-end part, but at least you'll see the data that we're getting into the adapter is the same as before. Yes, and we do have an option to support unit test, so we can take the test cases that you have already created, create unit tests for them to run Groovy scripts in, and then you can actually run the Groovy scripts in that way. And let's see if we got time towards the end, then we can look at that. But that's a part of the Git repository that we're creating. We'll also put these test cases down to it, so you can also run them there. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing is we here have the Figaf ERT application. In it, we have defined our different landscapes, what they are and who is supposed to manage these. We have defined some landscapes, and the benefit of this is we can actually just click here and go directly to our CPI system. And when you come to API management, it becomes really difficult. What's my dev portal on production thing? And that is what this would give you. So the first thing is we would need to set up a test case for this, for our PI system. We have faster CPI. We'll take this one. We will record our messages, create a new test case, webinar, We just want to record 2 messages. We will use all of them. So you have a way you can group these messages and insert specific data into them. So that way it's easier for you to find the right messages that you have. Or if it's some specific HR data, you can select it that way. So now we have selected it, we can start it. And this will then switch the iFlow into trace mode. And then I just need to go in and process this message. Come on. So now I'm just sending messages into this this iFlow. And once it's processed, I can pull messages. So this will go in, fetch all the input messages, or the messages from all the different trace steps that we have in the process. And this will take a little while. We can see the number of messages that I have, the status of them, stuff like that. So that is how we're creating test cases. So I think that is it. We can then create it as a test case. And with that, we have created our test case. And now we can see our message here. We can go, or the name we have, we can see all the different steps that we have in. What's the input message that we send into it. We can go edit it if we want to. And we can see all the attributes at all levels of this iFlow. We have some data anonymization, which would work in some scenarios where you could go in and give the custom ID a random value, or multiply it with a template. So if you have some input data you want to anonymize, you can use the tool for that also. So we have now our test case. We can run it, just say with a click of a button. This will then send this message into the tool. So it will switch the iFlow into trace mode, send the messages through, and then we will need to pull these messages. And there's some schedulers that will do this automatically, but we don't want to wait for it to be processed. And we can see it's then processing the same 54 messages again. And we can go and we can check the result. And see if we got some here that's compared successfully. So, and I guess these has not just been processed yet. So we can see, well, most of our cases was successful. So now we have created our test case and everything is good. So, and we can run this as many times. What's strange? Oh well, let's see. It'll probably be processed, or we have a small bug there. Good. So that was a little about how we can create test cases, how easy it is to run them. We can also, if we go here, we can view our messages. We have this option here to generate Groovy test scripts, and this will take this payload, create all the infrastructure to required to actually run this as Groovy scripts. Hopefully we'll get to that part also. That's pretty cool. Okay. So now we get into the change management part. And here it is about, so change management is about this thing, about being able to document what was really changed, what part of the iFlow was changed, and for what reason. So you want to be able to link it to a business case or business reason for this change to happen, because you as a developer should in most cases not do any changes to the PI system. Obviously if there's bug you can probably fix those, but I would recommend that it's in most cases just if the business requests something, you want to fix it. Then you want to be able to configure iflows in the full life cycle. So you can say, okay, we have this this information about our iflow, and we want to configure it in our new landscape. So we don't need to go in after we've deployed it and configure it and deploy it again. So it's just one place, and then everybody is actually in charge of handling it. So Figaf, in the Figaf tool, we have a ticket concept, and it is never going to replace ServiceNow, Jira, or whatever service request tool that you have, but it's just a way to handle all the information required for this processing, so you don't need to be involved in it. Or that you don't need to do anything manual with it, but you'll be able to see what has actually happened with it. We'll make the transport simpler. It will also apply changes after import, as we have seen. We have this virtual environment, so if you only have development and a productive tenant, this virtual environment will actually enable you to do virtual transport inside of this tenant. You can actually also have your productive system in the same one. I would not recommend it for a number of different reasons, but at least for the QA environment, that would make sense, and it will just create a package with the same content and then add some modifications on top of those. So endpoints and process direct adapters works the same way. And then it'll generate all the needed documentation that you need for this, so iflow documentation and a change documentation. So let's see this in action. And if any question, just put it into the chat. So first off, we now have our object, and we want to so here we have our so here we have the iflow, and we can actually take here and go directly. Ah, that's strange. Oh. It points to localhost and not the ET spaces one. Okay, so we get our iflow here. Let's make a modification in our is there any place where it is missing? Alright, so we have our resources. We can just edit this XSLT, create customer XSLT, and we will, instead of this demo, just write so we will now expect that our test case would fail because there's a webinar instead of demo. We'll save it as a new version. Demo, that's good. So now we've created a new version. We can obviously deploy it. And then while our deployment is triggered, we will also go back here. And here we will synchronize it. And our synchronization process works the following way. It will just go find our iflows, download all of them, or find our packages, then download all iflows in those. And then for each iflow, it will then do comparison of all the different scripts, mappings, and everything like that you have in the landscape that you want to check out. And yeah, this takes a little while depending on the system, but it's also one thing you can do in the background. So yeah, we can see it's now found 2 new object versions, so that's good. And we can see, so we got the fastest CPI calls, and then we got a change in here. If we wanted to know what was actually changed here, we can look at the versions, and we can see there was actually a change done here, and we can see the reason for this. So it was added something like that. I don't know what. But that means we can actually go in on a specific iFlow, a specific object, and say what was changed here. Oh, we wanted to see what was changed, so we can go here. We can compare versions, and we can see it's this part that was changed for demo 2 to webinar. So we will take these 2 versions and we will add it to a ticket. We'll create a new ticket. We have an option to assign create releases. We have an option to design who is actually the manager of this. We can design what reviewer admin, let me just, which landscape we want to assign, and then if we have, for instance, ServiceNow Jira request, we can then into the ServiceNow request into here, and that means we will be able to go from here to the ServiceNow ticket. And we'll just put in a description here. So now we have created our ticket. We can then look at our test cases, and we can see we got 4 test cases. I will only take this one, but we would obviously in a real scenario take all of them because they are needed for us to run this. So now we have assigned this to our ticket. We can specify we want to run it on our development system, and we can then go into our ticket. We can view what was actually run here. So we'll just pull this test case. Hopefully it's been processed, and we should then be able to see that there were some differences in the output of this. So we'll view the results. So we can see there was an error here. We will say look at the diffs, and we can see, okay, it was the expected change that we had demo 2, and now we got webinar. So we actually know what was being changed here. And all test cases is successfully except these parts. So we can say, okay, now we got a new scenario. We know that this is the new normal, and we can then just select our test cases and say, now this is our expected result. So once we run this, this is what we expect as output. So now we have documented that we have made a change to this scenario. Everybody is happy. We can then start our transport, and we can see it has been created, the transport. We then have our option here. We can see how many revisions we have of the iFlow and the different versions of it. We can see we can send it to approval. We can then specify what kind of parameters do we need to set in for this. So we can actually specify that the parameter in QA or production needs to be different. So let's set our this one to prod, the URL here to production, and we will also just change the password here to number 2. That we do not have, and when we press save here, it will go in and it will say, hey, there's actually an error here, you're not supposed to do that, and it's not deployed there. But for now, let's just stick with it. So we know we have a mistake in it, but it could obviously be we wanted to apply the new change later. So we'll approve it, or we'll send it to approval. Now I'm logged in as an approver, but when you're defining the landscape, you can go in and specify these people are allowed to approve our landscape. And then from that on, you can actually go in, select, then only the people that have this approval role will be able to look at the transport. They can obviously view what is in the system, what has been changed, and we can just say, okay, approve. We can also reject it, but I guess that then it will just go back and the developer need to create a new transport that he can then send to approval. So now, once we have done this, the approval, we are not able to change these configuration parameters anymore because someone has actually approved it, and that means they are locked until we create a new transport and want to run that transport. So we select import, and this will then apply this to our new iFlow. So if we go back to our CPI system, we should have a package that was then called set underscore Figaf QA. Let's play this one. C28 wasn't that the one we had? We can see our configuration here, and we can see we had entered the new URL we had, so we did not even have to do anything for this to work. So, and let's just see. So we can just refresh the screen, and then hopefully we will see. Okay, so we can see it's imported successful. We're still getting this warning that there's a password that is not there, but should be, and we can then fix it, check again, and then everybody is happy with this. So now we have done our transport, and we obviously would need to go through the different landscapes and apply it and configure it there. Next up is, we will set it to resolved, and then no more need to do different work on this. We can look at all the objects that has been assigned to this specific ticket, and then we can go here, we can create our report, and the report is created, and this report then contains information about what are the objects that were involved in this transport, what's the overview of it, what's the status in production, what are all the objects involved in it, what are the test cases that run, what are the successful and error test cases that we have, and here we can actually go in and see what were the difference was. But I would reckon that you'd run the test case again, so make sure that everything is green or successful. You may transport it to QA, do the approval there or testing there, and run again, and then you'll get these reports, and you can then see when did we import it on our QA system and everything like that worked. So that is how I see a governance process. You will take this document and you'll put it into Jira ServiceNow and say, okay, this is how I actually solved the issue. And if someone else at a later point in time actually finds out that there was a change to this iFlow, he can actually see there was what the ticket was we had here. He can go in and check all the different information about it. What was the service request? Who is actually involved in this scenario? There's a question about after the transport in the new environment, do we need to configure it again or deploy it? No, you can. The Figaf tool has information about all the configuration, so it will just import it, apply the configuration, and then deploy it. And yeah, so now you can see it should most likely be deployed. If we got everything working. So we can see here this one has just been applied at this point in time. So it has just recently been deployed when we did this. And if I create a new transport, it will obviously remember what are the different parameters that you have, and then see, okay, you have added a new parameter, please configure this one before you transport it. And then the approver will approve it or not. And you can also just not have approver and just say, okay, let's just move it along in the process. Any other questions on this transport part? I guess this is yeah, a little different than what you normally see in a CPI environment, where you're just transporting packages. And as I saw now, it also has an ability to remember what the parameters were, and you can then apply these. But here you would actually understand you can deploy single iflows. You don't need to deploy packages at any time. It's just one thing you transport and configure at one go. Yes. From a support perspective, there is also some different perspective that we do there. We have this concept about alerts. I'll put it possibly because it's not always alerts. So the standard approach is obviously something has failed. It will trigger a red iflow or an iflow an error, and you need to do something around that. With that, you can also, you can add rules about ordering something like that. So rules could be resend or for some CPI scenarios, depending on if you have a specific scripts added to it in the beginning and in the error handling, then the Figaf tool will enable you to actually send this again or resend it. It can also send it to a webhook, so you can send a notification to Jira. It can send an email to user, and it can actually also mute certain alerts for an hour or whatever you wanted, so you don't get your inbox flooded with events that is just duplicates of other ones. We also have a message monitor, where you can actually go in from a user perspective to find what that user is supposed to see. So you'll create a finance interface, you'll create an HR interface. Then in the Figaf tool, you can assign users to these two iflow monitors, and they can then see the iflows that is able to do these things. And so let me just show you how that works. So here we have the support tool, and we have a number of consumers. So we have defined here, we have one that says if, and here you can just use the OData filter. If it's status equal failed, then we know it's a failed one. If status of receiver equal log, we know there's some extra thing we need to fetch from this. And then we got some about some metric alerts that we can set up to fix on. But let's take a look. I don't think we have that many alerts going on in our system, but maybe some older ones. So here we have, actually we got some alerts today. We can go in, we can define them, we can see they're all hitting the default rule. So this is the rule that we have defined, and we haven't really figured out what to do with. So let's take a look at this. Many messages here. Here we can see the alert, some information about when it was triggered, what type of scenarios. Yeah, message ID, status failed, what's the log level of this, and we got a link to the iflow, so we can actually open this and see directly what's the message payload of it. If it had attachments, you would be able to see them down here. But now we got this one, we need to fix it, and what we can do about it. So we will create a new rule. We can go in and we can then define, so it says here if message contain number range exception. So let's just call it that. Number range exception. So we'll just go in here and say if message contain number range exception. They would then, these XPath rules will then be processed in an order, so we can just put something here. Do we want to send it to a specific user? Attachments, should we send attachment? How do we want to send attachments? And we'll write some alert saying number range exception, you can fix it. And then we can actually write a small guide to that person that will get it. We can set it up and send it to Jira or something else, so we can actually see what's happening there. And what do we need to do when we're getting this? How difficult is it to fix? So we'll just say it's enabled, it's saved. And then next time we'll get this rule. Oh, we'll just, we have a test. Where is it? Just, we can test the message and everything like that works, that the XPath will find the right, will be triggered in this scenario. So we'll just say saved. And now we've just created a new rule for number range exception. So we can see it in here, number range exception, and then they would be processed in this order. And if it finds number range exception, it knows what to do with it and who to inform about this, and everything would work out. And it could also be that you have specified receiver equal error or something like that, or receiver Salesforce equal error or comma error or something like that, and just search for all things with error in it, download them, put them into the tool, set up this locking and rule engine on it, and then you can handle it pretty quickly. We also have the message monitor we talked about. And here you can go in edit mode. So we have one here we can specify. In this CPI course, we have access to create multiple iflows in it. We can see all of these iflows in it. We can add new or anything like that if we wanted to. We can see how many times they have been processed and what's going on in it. So let's see if we got something. So we got some Fibonacci in this one. And that means we can also drill down in some of these messages when they're processed by who. And with this, we have a really good view of what's going on because we have application ID or everything like that on the cross side here. And then the last part, and I think this is actually also a bit interesting, is we got an overview of how the system is performing, CPU usage, latency. So how much latency is there in the system when we're calling it. And here we probably would set an alert maybe that says if latency is above 2 seconds or something like that, we should get a notification that there's something wrong, we need to investigate. It says the status and the number of messages that you're processing per hour. Obviously, it can be difficult knowing what the CPU usage is and what these other things need to be. One thing that's actually a bit interesting we found yesterday was before we only had 2 nodes in our system. So maybe this one's better to see. So we only had a map and a runtime node, but now it seems like we got 2 runtime nodes on it. So that's maybe just be a small change with the CPI system. So here we can see, oh, there's also 2 there. We need to go along with it. Oh well. that gives us some extra ability to understand what is going on in the system. Great. Any questions? I can see we're going a little long. I'll cover the last part, which is development. Obviously, it needs to be the first part, but from understanding of the tool and everything like that, it needs to come towards the end, because then you have a better idea about what it's actually able to do. So you would obviously still need to do the development in the web UI for message mapping, and most importantly the BPMN modeling you'd need to do there. But if you want to do modifications of scripts, XSLT, Vistals, as you saw, editing small things in an XSLT is okay. If you want to do more development on challenges, it becomes it's not really the right IDE for it. So you can speed up the development by using an IDE, and there's a lot of ways you can actually use IDEs for this. And yeah, you can either go in and upload the file, or so open the editor, upload the file. What I wanted to do was actually simplify the development process. So you would, instead of having to go and work on these things, you can actually just get it directly. So we have decided that Git was the best way to create a common development environment that users could actually access, and were able to give users a good indication of what the different components was in it. And the reason also is that we can give a lot of pre-delivered content packages, stuff like that, that makes it a lot easier for you to deploy iFlows and handle it, and you don't. The idea is also to make it as simple, so you do not need to do any configuration at all. You can just take this Git repository and start using it. Let's see what else we have. We have created some Gradle plugins, and the benefit of this is that from your IDE you can go directly and deploy content to the CPI or API management if you wanted to. You can also run Figaf tests and call some of the Figaf test suites directly from the Gradle plugin. So let me just show you what this looks like. So in the Figaf tool, under our agents, this is where we're connecting to the different systems, and we can see here we actually have a Git integration here. We have specified it should use this CPI Git where local repository and stuff like that is. Then it will throw up this data into this Git repository, and then in my IntelliJ, I have then got this IDE that I can use, and from here I actually have able to see. Let's see if we can actually fetch this. So we'll see if we can pull up. We have anything dirty in the repository. So there's something I need to revert. So let's see if it works now. And the interesting thing is, obviously, if this XSLT was then updated, and we can see it's now updated with webinar, which was the one we created. So we can go and make a modification, and we can go here, find our iFlow here in the package. faster CPI. Here we have it. We can deploy it. I need it. So there's once you deploy it, you'll get some different templates with usernames to it, what needs to be applied for this to work, and then you can just copy this and use it as your own configuration. There's also a settings file that defines what are the different flows we have out here. So once you have defined this, you can actually go here, deploy it, upload the iFlow directly from here. You can run tests, run the test suite if you have to find test suites for it. So that means that the process of running CPI will be a lot easier because everything is controlled just from in here, and you can edit the XSLT a lot easier than anywhere else. With our test cases, the way we are generating this is in here, our test package. We then have created a script that's just a sample script where it will add the different test cases that we have created. And if we look at the test data, we can see that there's test data for set header process. There's the input message that it's getting, all the properties that it's getting, and the payload that it is, or body that needs to be sent to this script. And then we got the same for output. And then this script will then handle running of these things. So we can actually run it here, and then it will run the script, verify that everything is okay, and that means that you can actually run it from directly from here. You'll get some errors if there's something that is different than expected. So we can see there was that error 7 has dummy value 10, but null was expected. So with this, you can actually see which of the test cases are running, what was the differences that we got, making it a lot easier for you to understand, is my script running? And you can go in, you can set it into debug, and you can hit this directly with the debugging functionality. See, time's running out. So let me just run the last kind of presentation. We do have a lot of the same concepts for PI. The environment is a little different, but it does support the same kind of transport, managing the iFlow, configuring channels, approving transport, and full visibility about what you're transporting. So the Figaf tool knows in this transport that it's managing itself, what are the iFlows in it, or what are the objects in it, and being able to transport it. It's easy to set up testing. The data anonymization really works there because you're just having an input and it's a bunch of output messages. It supports components-based message alerting as the alert, and then we have the migration tool that will allow you to take a PI 7.1 dual stack system and migrate it to a single stack system. Manage the full migration process, moving interfaces time by time, testing, and configure them in the full landscape. So where is the savings? It's obviously in the developer time. You'll save time because the development is faster. You don't need to spend as much on change management. It's easier to run the testing, and then the support is simpler because it can be automated. As you saw, we can send information directly to the business user. This thing needs to be changed. From a business perspective, they would also save time because they don't need to be as much involved in the regression testing. Obviously, you would still need to do some of the manual tests that you need to perform, like this new thing, does it work? But you don't need to be involved in the regression testing. And then with the virtual environment, you can save the QA environment because that would be fully virtualized with the Figaf tool. Getting started. You can run this on a laptop. I would have shown you that you probably could get started in about 5 minutes. Just go to figaf.com/IRT. and then you can start up if you want to do this in a real enterprise environment, obviously you would need a server you can run it on, and we support a number of different environments, Docker, standalone Java application, and then we need one of these commercial grade databases. We also have an option and that is if you're using the Figaf tool, you can also run it in the Figaf cloud. And it is, if you just want to do a proof of concept of the CPI, that is also a useful way to go, and you can just sign up figaf.com/IRT cloud. So it's pretty simple. The licensing cost, if you just want the testing, it is per number of ICOs that you're testing. It starts at 10,000 euros a year. If you have one DevOps, so that's the full change management lifecycle. It starts at 15,000 a year. And there's some trial options. And there's also, if you just run it in our cloud in a small environment, I think we start at like 5,000 euros a year, where you can use the tool to manage your CPI system for it. So figaf.com/IT, if you have not signed up, it is pretty simple to get started.